By September 16, 1776, the British had taken New York City. 3 days later, a devastating fire destroyed much of the city's west side. By December, General George Washington and what remained of his army had retreated into New Jersey. That same month, out of fear that the British would soon take Philadelphia, the Continental Congress moved their deliberations to Baltimore. American patriots were in dire straits. British Commander William Howe thought the whole war would soon be over. He should have thought again. By July 1776, General Washington had an army of 19,000 men in position at New York City. 9,000 were officially members of the Continental Army, the other 10,000 militia from New York and nearby states. A first wave of 20,000 British forces arrived in New York Harbor on 130 or more ships. The numbers of men swelled, as did the British fleet of warships, transports, and smaller vessels. British Commander William Howe now marshaled a formidable army of 32,000 men. 8,000 of them were German mercenaries, the largest group of which were from Hesse Castle. The Americans called them Hessians. The British forces camped on Staten Island. Washington's troops built fortifications at 3 spots: in Manhattan, across the Hudson River on the Jersey shoreline, and in Brooklyn. Howe sent a messenger to meet with Washington and seek his surrender. By Colonel Henry Knox's account, the British officer was intimidated by General Washington. He returned to Howe entirely unsuccessful in his mission. On August 27th, the two forces confronted each other in the Battle of Brooklyn, also known as the Battle of Long Island. In the most defining maneuver of the day, 20,000 British troops moved around Washington's eastern flank. Patriots suffered 2,000 casualties, the British only several hundred. The loss was great, but Washington did not surrender. He retreated to the edge of the East River, then, under the cover of night and amidst a providential fog, sailed across the river to Manhattan. The Battle of Kips Bay followed on September 15th. The British again defeated the Americans. The Americans fared better at the Battle of Harlem Heights the next day, but the British now occupied most of New York City. On September 21st, Connecticut Captain Nathan Hale was captured by the British and executed as a spy. Before hanging the 21-year-old Patriot, the British asked if he had any last words, to which Hale replied, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." On November 16th, American troops mounted a final defense of New York at Fort Washington, an earthen fortification on the north end of Manhattan. General Washington observed the battle from across the Hudson River. To his dismay, the British, who outnumbered the Americans more than 2-1, routed the Patriot forces and took over 2,000 prisoners of war. Almost all of them would die in captivity. Washington and his remaining forces retreated south through New Jersey, pursued by British General Lord Cornwallis. Halfway across the state, the British halted their pursuit. The American forces carried on into Pennsylvania, but they were cold and exhausted, their morale declining. By the year's end, most of the Army's enlistments would expire. Most of the men would likely return to their families. Surely Washington would hold up for the winter and try to rebuild. On December 16th, he wrote to his brother that if there was no significant change in their fortunes, the game will be pretty well up. Then came the game changer. Undaunted, Washington planned to cross the Delaware River and mount a surprise attack on the Hessian garrison at Trenton. It was Christmas night, December 25th, 1776. A winter storm hit the area just as Washington and his troops crossed the river. The wind was stiff, the snow deepening by the hour. Hessian Colonel Johann Rall dismissed any concerns about the Americans. "Those clodhoppers," he insisted, "will not attack us." Washington's plan had called for 3 crossing points, but 2 of them were choked with ice. His group alone, about 2,400 troops, made it across the river and commenced the 9-mile march to Trenton. Henry Knox ferried 16 cannons across the Delaware and moved them toward the Hessians. At 8 o'clock in the morning, Washington launched his surprise attack. Colonel Rall positioned his men in the center of town, replete with cannon fire of their own. But Knox and his men fired on the Hessians and drove them back. Rall attempted a counterattack, but the Americans had the German forces surrounded. As the Hessians tried to defend against Washington's advancing troops, musket fire burst forth from the nearby houses. Rall and 22 other Hessian soldiers were killed. Washington and his men took 896 prisoners of war. They suffered only a handful of casualties. The general is seen here with the enemy's colors. Emboldened, Washington would cross the Delaware twice more. Just after the new year, he won the Battle of Princeton. Washington had surprised everyone, especially the Hessians and British commander Hale. His bold strategy led to victories at Trenton and Princeton. In the Army and among the Patriot public, confidence in the commander of the Continental Army soared. With General Washington in command, Americans now knew that they could win the war. George Washington had become America's first national hero.